Tropical storm brewing in the Philippine Sea, the latest development in the Western Pacific. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 15th. So we have a very populated scene at the moment, though there's no strong storms active. We have at least 5 tropical cyclones that are currently active, including Karl and 4 in the Western Pacific. So we're going to have our work cut out explaining them all to you. So 21W being the strongest system there, moving off towards the northeast. Day 137 in the Atlantic, Karl is looking very, very poor this evening and is on its last legs. And an area of interest that we've still got marked at 10% in the Eastern Atlantic, although the signs have been diminishing in the last 24 hours. In the Eastern Pacific, we're pleased to say once again that there is nothing on the horizon here on day 154 of hurricane season. Looking out towards the next 5 days, nothing to really report, and definitely nothing to mark on the screen. In the west, a lot going on here. 21W, a tropical storm marked by our analyst team, and next to it a depression 91W, 23W, the up-and-coming storm near the Philippines, and Sonca moving inland over Vietnam, at 20% behind 23W as well, for possible further development as we enter the next week. And looking in the North Indian Ocean, things looking very quiet here still, no areas of interest for the next 5 days, although we're still monitoring that potential storm beyond that 5-day period. Latest satellite imagery, and this is what the Atlantic looks like, and you'll notice that a lot of that convection from Karl is now over land over the coast of Mexico, but I'm pretty sure it's still actually over water, the centre of the storm. Difficult to even establish where the centre of it actually is right now, but recon will be in and around the storm throughout this afternoon, if not already, as this update goes out. Looking towards the Eastern Pacific there, things looking fairly quiet generally as well. So things are very quiet in the Western Hemisphere, and we are very thankful for that we're not seeing any more crazy Atlantic storms right now. Here's another view showing Karl there on the visible imagery just as it goes dark, and it is difficult to spot where that centre of circulation might be, and a few bits of convection still blowing up over water, but a lot of it is over land over the southernmost part of Mexico, entering into Guatemala. Certainly we'll be seeing locally high amounts of rain, possibly expecting up to 150, maybe 200 millimeters of rainfall in some of those areas. Here's the Western Pacific, take a look at the view here. Sonca moving inland, very messy system too, but producing a lot of rainfall along the coast. And of course Tropical Depression 23W, which is our next tip for tropical cyclone development and could become a typhoon as it moves through the Luzon Strait and into the South China Sea. Right now, a fairly small system, and that will work in its favour as it navigates that fairly small body of water into the South China Sea there. And look east at those 2 other systems that are fighting it out way over the open waters of the Western Pacific. Personally, I don't think very much of either of them, but there is that feature there on the right hand side of the image, a tropical storm and a tropical depression marked by our team. There it is again on the right hand side near the top, as well as those 2 other systems. Certainly the Western Pacific trying to go all out in getting its named storms or its named storm count up. Although so far only 1 named storm has been produced by this sequence of events, and it took long enough for Sonca to develop, and we may see our next one soon. Indian Ocean looking rather quiet. You can see monsoonal patterns in the equatorial regions that might develop into that tropical cyclone next week, but at the moment looking awfully quiet. And towards the Australian region, a weak front dying off the east coast of Australia, and a rather powerful extratropical storm looks like it's developing down towards the southeast there. We did have our eye on that for potential subtropical development, but of course you can see it here quite clearly, extratropical as it moves to the southeast. It's way too late for it to potentially be subtropical. Let's check those sea surface temperatures, pushing 30 degrees still along the coast of Mexico, the Pacific coast that is. In the Gulf of Mexico, still 28, pushing 29 along the coast of Mexico itself at Tabasco, where Karl is. And in the main development region of the Atlantic, it's still looking decent. The Northern Gulf is starting to wear off in temperatures, and the Atlantic in general is starting to decrease at those higher latitudes, but there's still plenty of time for further developments across the open waters of the Atlantic. Indian Ocean, waters continuing to increase in temperature along the coast of India on the eastern coast. It's preparing for its second peak season that we usually attribute to the Indian Ocean. And in the Western Pacific, the South China Sea cooled off quite a bit there underneath Sonca's influence, but the Philippine Sea and the rest of the Western Pacific still looking in decent shape. Those waters though really starting to tail off the coast of Japan now, leaving the 26 degree isotherm as the autumn-fall months take their toll. Looking at the anomalies, you'll see that the Western Pacific is still generally above average. The Eastern Pacific is near average, and in the Atlantic it is generally above average, although near average in the Gulf, near where Karl is right now, and in the Caribbean one or two cooler spots, as well as in the Sargasso Sea. But overall the Atlantic is still above average, as is the oceanic heat content. The Western Caribbean here still showing up some of those really dark colours, so very good conditions for potential later activity in the Western Caribbean. And looking towards the Eastern Pacific, dying off a little bit again, the OHC, and in the Western Pacific starting to fade just a little bit there as well, but still very powerful oceanic heat content there for that whole region, as you would normally expect. Check the computer models, you can see Karl dying off rather quickly off the coast of Mexico there, but look to the right hand side, a potential new system. That's the 10% chance that we've given looking forward over that 5-day period. And right at the very end of the loop you can see something there in the Eastern Pacific on day 5, but the main thing that we're looking at there is what happens to that Atlantic system out in the MDR. Well, nothing much, but it has just a little opportunity for a potential brief spin up. Well, we'll see what comes out of that. Western Pacific, you can see all of these systems here. 91W gets the better of 21W there by the looks of things. It becomes a tropical storm in its own right for quite a while. The 23W becomes a typhoon in the South China Sea and stays there for quite some time before making landfall on Hainan. And then that other system comes in behind in the Philippine Sea and develops into another typhoon there on the latest forecast, up to that 5-day point, and following a similar track to 23W in its earlier stages, but much stronger. We'll believe it when we see it, I think, because the GFS put up something similar for 23W, and so far it hasn't materialized. However, something that probably will is the rainfall at any rate from this system. Already Vietnam still getting a little bit more rain from Sonca. It's probably received a lot there already, but mainly looking at 23W here, you can see some of those pink areas over the northern part of Luzon. 26 to 28 inches of rain there. That is a hell of a lot. That is nearly 650 millimeters, and pushing 12 inches, that's 300 millimeters for Hainan. And still in the northern part of Taiwan, from residual effects of this system, potentially 10 inches, 250 millimeters more. And in Vietnam, also almost that amount from what's left of Sonca. So still a very wet phase here in the Western Pacific no matter what. In the longer range, day 5 to 10, this is the Eastern Pacific once again, blowing up that tropical storm. Potentially might even form from some of Karl's remnants, believe it or not, and then makes landfall quite shortly in Mexico there. I mean, I think it's mainly speculation that it would be caused by Karl's remnants in any way, shape or form, but you know, you might get just a tiny bit of its energy floating its way over there and becoming part of this bigger system. That's a hurricane there before it makes landfall, but that is towards the end of that 10-day period. What happens that second typhoon? It's a big one, becoming a category 3 or 4 there as it grazes the northern coast of Luzon and into the South China Sea. Again, believe it when we see it, because it's a very volatile basin right now, the Western Pacific, with all of these systems and so many variables and uncertainties, so I wouldn't bet a dime on that as this system is shown there on the GFS. Fascinating though. And in the Indian Ocean, Was this potential storm that we've been looking for? Well, it's been chopping and changing quite a lot on the models, and the GFS I think has downtrended a little bit again on this one. Look at it there, still a large system, but barely getting to Typhoon equivalent strength, category 1, on that latest model run. So yes, that is another downtrend from the GFS model there, and other models still hesitant to even display anything for this system, so we're not going to display any percentage chance in the next 5 days. That's the serious stuff out of the way though. You can take a look at the Force 13 store by scanning that barcode, and you can take a look at our individual and full season animations on request, bespoke animations to your choosing. Also our Still Waiting for Hone t-shirt, which I think will still be in style for quite a bit longer yet. And in the silly range, what is the end game for that second Typhoon? Well, there it goes, drifts into the coast of Vietnam, probably a category 1 by the time it gets there. Right towards the end of the month now. Does anything else come up there? Looks like something tries to form, doesn't quite get there. Well, it tries against that frontal system. It'll be a close one, but I think those 2 Typhoon threats that we're looking at before then is going to be more interesting. And I'm happy to say that the model part has been quite short here because there's nothing else out there in the long range of any note. So at this point, to what happened on this day, and on October 15th, 1954, one of the classic hurricane impacts, Hurricane Hazel, which sped up and rammed the US East Coast, I think it was South Carolina or North Carolina, I think it was South, as a category 4, and then rammed through at great speed through to Canada, and was one of the most deadliest, or not deadliest potentially, but most impactful storms in the interior of Canada. Olga was also active, another category 4 in the Western Pacific, and Tropical Depression 2S in the Southwest Indian Ocean. Well, back to today, and in the Atlantic, our next name is Lisa. In the Eastern Pacific, Roslyn is next up on their naming list, and in the Central Pacific, we are indeed still waiting for Hone. If you don't get the joke, it's not really a joke, it's just that we've been waiting for 3 years for that storm now. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Nesa, followed by Haitang, and in the North Indian Ocean, we're looking out still for Sitrang. And as we take a look towards the southern hemisphere, the next name in the Australian region is Darien, and that's becoming quite a familiar name now, Chiniso in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and Harley in the South Pacific. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.